All of us have been lied to about chronic wasting disease management, and this video proves it. My name is Keith Warren. I'm a former Texas deer breeder, and I'm a rancher. This video was recently filmed at the Texas Deer Association conference, and it starts out with a factual statement that is scientifically proven. The truth about CWD has been buried by political agendas, money, fear, and deception. The USDA herd certification program, called the HCP, is a highly successful program, and it's working well across the nation. But Texas wants out. They want out of the HCP program because they want to do the things the program doesn't allow them to do, like tonsil testing. They want out of the HCP program because they think they know better than the USDA, and Texas Parks and Wildlife Department wants to follow their own made-up rules, even though the performance data of the HCP program in all other states shows that it works well, except in Texas, where here again Texas refuses to follow HCP rules. We all remember COVID and how it impacted all of us. In the close of this video, Dr. Seabury, well, he brings it all around. It's very much like COVID. What are you going to do when CWD is found everywhere? Wait till you hear what Texas Parks and Wildlife Director Alan Kane says then. You be the judge if Parks and Wildlife is unfairly targeting the Texas deer breeders or not. You got a comment? Leave it below. Let's get the video started, and make sure and hit that subscribe button and share the video with a friend.
Again, the science is there. Logic is sometimes lacking. Common sense is sometimes lacking. But the science is there for people to control and to mitigate the disease in their farmed operations. And no such mitigation is or can happen in the wild. I think we need to, you need to remind people about that, you know? I mean, people want to show value in doing something about CWD, so you're the focus of that, right? Because something can actually be done. But we need to remind ourselves and everyone else that the scientific expectation is that it will spread all over the wild, and you will ultimately be surrounded in proximity, at least at low prevalence, right?
Howdy, Alan. Thank you for coming. I got a question about the HCP program. Am I to understand you said that they limit the GEBVs right now on movement?
I can't, well, in the herd plans right now that I've seen sign, and you're gonna keep deer in the facility and kind of continue on, you have to cull out deer that don't have whatever GEB value. I think that's in the HCP. I will check, Keith, and let you know. I mean, I just know it's in the herd plans, and all three folks have signed off on it, because some of these facilities, and there's one out that you're familiar with probably in the Uvalde area, they have to cull every year to meet that GB values. That's the only ones they can keep in their facility.
We need to have specific answers of what doing away with this program, what are the real benefits going to be for everybody?
Good question. I mean, I just know that the herd plans we have now, trying to deal with some of the facility owners, the pod facility owners, have been difficult. In other words, I can think of an example. If you met all the testing standards and requirements of the herd plan, and you were going to turn bucks out to be harvested that fall, you know, to try to drive some income. Right now on the herd plans, I believe those are, you can only release deer that meet a certain GB value. If we come out of the HCP program, that might be an example where we don't have to worry about that. You could just turn out any buck, for example, as long as it's harvested that season. Those are examples. And to your point, I guess, you know, maybe that's a question for animal health, and, you know, they're the ones that are withdrawing from the program, so it gives us hopefully some more flexibility. And I wrote the question down so I can bring that up, you know, when we have a chance. And, you know, all this is contingent upon things getting adopted next week and everything. I'm hearing that it probably will, so, but fair point. And so, Keith, I guess at the end of the day, once that happens, if it's adopted, then it's like, tell us what things are going to be in the herd plan. But I do have a question for you. If there was going to be flexibility, wouldn't you agree that every situation is different every trace might be different depending on, there's different risk, right? Depending on when the trace happened or when the deer that was exposed happened. Obviously, Wildlife Division, who I work in and what I run, is we're not law enforcement, we're not the game wardens out there. We do have our veterinarians on staff, and they can provide that veterinary medical assistance and direction and guidance. I guess, what's different between them and animal health veterinarian that's looking at the herd plan in your mind?
History. Historically, what has happened with trying to deal with parks and wildlife. Historically, we have had a really hard time, and I think that it's almost clear to everybody that y'all don't want to get a resolution where we can fix this. It's like, what is the end game? Seriously, what is the end game?
End game
with chronic wasting disease. When Chris talks about the outside, people on the outside with wild deer and the prevalency being so that we're running around the track in our enclosed facilities doing all these things, and there's nothing to mitigate the disease on the outside. What happens when all of a sudden there's chronic wasting disease around us? What happens then?
Fair question. The thing that I wrestle with in my head, it's difficult to manage the disease in the free-ranging population out there. It shows up in places, Georgia, Oregon, or Washington State, California in the last year, and we don't know how it got there, can't point to any one thing. And so that makes it a challenge trying to manage, free-ranging populations. I don't know that we can ever figure that out or stop it, right? Some states try things like culling and whatever else, or targeted removal to try to keep prevalence low. But even Missouri is seeing it hopscotch to new counties, but they're doing what they can to try to keep the prevalence low. There's not a lot that we can do in the free range out there. There's things that have been tried. I don't know how successful it is. If you can hope to keep the prevalence down, that's a good thing. The flip side is, if you got disease in a pen and we know it's there, the question is, how can we manage it? And I know a lot of people don't want to depopulate everything, and I don't want to. Nobody likes killing deer, and I especially don't. But we also don't want to move disease out of a pen into the pasture and create another problem, whether it's for you as a landowner, if it's a high fence place, or the neighbors, or whatever. And so, Keith, I don't have a good answer. I just know that when it's in the facility, the disease is, and we've detected it, it's how do we address, the risk there, trying to minimize it so we're not moving something out in the pasture. Now, maybe you're thinking, hell, if it's everywhere, it doesn't matter. I don't know. I know that wouldn't be responsible of Parks and Wildlife.
Let Dr. Seabury ask his question. I want to try to get to as many things as we can.
It's more of a clarification than a question. There's not a rule in a herd plan from USDA that says that you can't hunt out bucks in a positive facility unless they meet a genetic value on the test. That's not a rule. That is a made-up rule by our own state folks. Because if you call USDA and you ask them that, it's not a rule. It's not part of the HCP. So any gain in flexibility there is no gain, because they already allow that. They already allow them to hunt the bucks out as a way to reduce the population size, as long as they pass a rectal antemortem test, and as long as they can be taken off the landscape in a rapid fashion so that they can recover some of that money. So that is not a real gain for quitting the HCP. That has nothing to do with it, really. We've discussed this with some of the state folks. And when it comes to mule deer and this place you talked about, everyone knows that mule deer are more sensitive to CWD. They just are. But all these studies that come from those places are cherry-picked too, because anytime they see a decline among the deer, they assume if CWD is present that it's the cause. They don't build a model where they put other variables in there, like record snowpack or record predator numbers or hey, we poured out all this silage and attracted all these deer, and we attracted a bunch of predators too. But CWD's there, and now we see fewer deer, right? Those things are never fleshed out. It's always assumed that in a small place where we do see deer declines, that it must be CWD that's doing it. And that doesn't bear out in the Wisconsin data. When we look at the data as a whole, it doesn't.
I'm not talking about Wisconsin,
I
Chris.
get it.
I know it's a productive herd because, to your point, right, if you've got production that's outpacing mortality,
Right.
It doesn't matter, right?
And I agree that mule deer are more sensitive, but everyone needs to know that it's not a rule that you can't release bucks unless they pass this genetic test. That's not a USDA rule. That's a Texas rule. So they're not complicating a herd plan with that. Whoever says that has got their wires crossed, because that's not a USDA rule. You can call the program director, ask her, and she'll tell you that I'm correct about this.
They do require a 5-year trace though, right? That's what,
They're turning that down. In the new program standards, they're reducing the trace.
okay.
I think
They're not going to reduce it as much as they should, because they got a lot of pushback by some political groups who are opposed to deer and elk farming. But the maximum real number is probably 3 years. I think that all indications are that they're gonna land on 4 years. I don't think they're gonna land on 3. They might, but they're more comfortable.
So I have a question kind of going back historically about antemortem rectal testing. So I know you were speaking earlier about increased testing, RT quick, trying to figure out how to find it in facilities sooner and quicker and faster. It appears to me, based off of historically, that going back before antemortem testing requirements, we actually did a better job with the previous testing requirements from not spreading CWD in our pens. Because when we passed that emergency rule for the antemortem testing, lots of these facilities were clean. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of deer were tested and they were clean. 80,000 were clean. And then all of a sudden, with this new antemortem testing, now herds that were found clean and whole herd test and these things come out, and in a short period of time, all of a sudden, we have CWD positive in all these facilities at a number that's unfathomable to me based off of where we were to where we are. So how is the CWD showing up in these pens? And to me, it's a direct correlation and kind of says, hey, maybe we're really messing this up by, trying to force a way to try to find it, and maybe we're doing more harm than good.
Yeah, I need to think about that for a second. No, I mean, I hear that, antemortem testing is causing this. But you made the statement before we had antemortem testing, everybody was clean, but they weren't doing antemortem testing, they were testing postmortem deer deaths in the pen, and right, and so that was abysmal, and we were only required at one time to 20% test, and then there was people missing tests. Now,
I'm saying historically that was our way of doing it. Then we fast forward and said, hey, that's not adequate. We're going to do antemortem testing, and then all these deer were still clean. And I think that I think that even your department probably thought that was not going to be the case whatsoever. We were going to cast a big net and catch a bunch of deer that were positive. And it didn't happen for several years.
Yeah, but you started off when we started the antemortem testing in 2016, I don't remember the exact year, there was testing at some level to get people back to movement qualified status, but there wasn't 100% testing before it went to release. There wasn't 100% testing between breeders, right? And so as that changed in the last few years, your testing rate increased on the volume of deer, and so, I guess good or bad, if CWD's out there in different facilities, it's probably at a lower prevalence rate, and so the Antemortem testing is catching it. Could, CWD be spread through Antemortem testing? I suppose if a veterinarian or somebody was using tools and they weren't sterilizing, they're using on the same deer, that's something to consider. I don't know. The other point I would make is that if Antemortem testing is part of the reason CWD, deer's getting CWD, well, that means CWD somewhere in there, whether it's in the feed, in the soil, in another deer, it's the disease is there. It just didn't manifest out of thin air in that pen, and so you got to think about that too.
Well, that's what I was wondering, is where's it coming from? Are we doing more harm by sending these veterinarians from facility to facility to facility to facility to do this? Transmission-wise, epidemiological, you guys tell us, hey, if you're going to go from one facility to the other, you better have 2 different buggies, or animal health does. I won't say you guys, but there's certain protocols in there, and I just wonder,
I think
what we're doing on what we, and I'm saying that because I'm, a citizen of Texas. What is Texas Parks and Wildlife doing to figure that out? How is it showing up in the deer pens when it wasn't there?
As we have these POS facilities, veterinarian and animal health, they do an epidemiology assessment of that facility, but something I can't explain. There's some facilities that we have that are closed facilities, that showed up positive. I mean, there's one in Medina County I can think of that was closed for 12 years, and CWD showed up there. How it got there, I have no clue. Is it in the feed? Is it somebody not doing proper biosecurity into their facility? I mean, there's folks here in this room that have good biosecurity practices. They have a bleach bath when you walk into their place. You got to bleach your shoes. How many of you walk into other facilities? How many of you have been to a positive facility somewhere, didn't bleach your boots when you left and go to somebody else's facility? That's just best management practices that I would expect that the industry would embrace and do everything you can to minimize your exposure, and that includes using, and Chris will say this, I'm sure, that you should use individual tools for every deer, right, Chris?
Yeah, right, yeah. I have seen it be spread that way firsthand. And I think what Mr. Nash was trying to say has some merit, because there were tens of thousands of Antemortem tests that were done, and then no positives emerged until roughly the incubation period. And then we had a steady stream of new positives. And there were only a handful of people that could go around and do all those tests then. And they weren't all done with disposable tools. And so, to say that just the increased testing is responsible for that steady emerging string of positives is not epidemiologically reasonable. I don't know of any epidemiological investigation other than a direct trace or epi-link where they've done such a thing and they've come and they said, we figured out how it got over here, okay? I figured out how some people got it just by talking to them about how they did their management practices and their testing and things like that. And if it's in the feed, then what are you gonna do? I mean, it's not just deer breeders that are using alfalfa. Everybody's using alfalfa. A lot of it's grown in CWD endemic areas. I mean, and then they truck it in. Now what? I mean,
I think, Chris, the point is if nobody, I don't think anybody in this room or anybody in the state or the country wants CWD spread anywhere, right?
Right.
And if there's, God forbid, CWD's all over the nation, doesn't matter, then yeah, turn deer out, who cares? But the reality, it's not, or it's not at a high enough prevalence out there. And so the question is, if you know CWD's in a facility somehow, how do you manage it so you're not spreading it somewhere else?
I'll agree with part of that, but what we don't have is widespread surveillance in the wild with technologies capable of finding misfolded prions all over the place where we can blanket lay down and ask this question that you're talking about, right? If I go build a high fence anywhere in Texas, I don't know what used that property before I do that.
Right.
And when I build it,
even if it's 100 acres or 200 or 300, I'm going to catch deer in there that just live there on the property. I don't know if they have a disease. Maybe they had sheep there and they had scrapie. You don't know what's in the soil. And so to your point, you know, nobody wants to have CWD, but it's going to spread uncontrollably in the wild. I don't think we're ever going to have a situation like Wisconsin, because the wild deer in Texas, 75% have a 96S, at least one. That'll slow it down. But it is going to spread everywhere, and there's nothing that you guys are going to do to stop it.
So Chris,
even if you shoot the density down, you're working against Mother Nature. You're undoing her work, because she's going to try to induce tolerance with a little bit of resistance, and all you're doing is undermining that. So I guess my question is, when we finally arrive at the point where we accept what I'm saying is true, what about all the people along the way that lost everything in their livelihood because we thought we needed to do something, and we thought that we needed to do something a certain way, and it didn't change the inevitable.
So Chris,
I want to suppress it in the pens and in the farming situation, which is why I've exerted myself. We're going to end up in a place where if we do enough surveillance, there won't be anywhere in the wild where we can't go find it, at least at low prevalence. Nowhere.
yeah, I don't know.
Great questions, and we could ask 100 more. But we have some legislators that are waiting back there for their turn to talk. And again, let me just first say, Alan, we appreciate you very much being willing to come visit with us, and once again, and field questions, and I'm sure he'd be happy to visit with you individually as well. And so thank you very much for being here, Alan. We appreciate
Thank you,
you.
Chris.